Okay, so welcome to our final archetype. This is our class on the priestess archetype, and I'm really excited to talk about this archetype with you today. I have a lot to share, and I we're going to talk a little bit about what this archetype means and how and like my relationship to it and how we can work with it. And I think it's very relevant for right now that we're in eclipse season as we're recording this to be talking about this archetype. We're going to talk about how the transition from the alchemist to the priestess works. And then we're also going to talk about some of the areas where we might be blocked in being able to access this archetype, because I think with these preliminary classes, it's going to be really helpful for us to kind of see where our blocks can be so that when we actually go into the Rose Temple and we're studying these archetypes and working with the practices and all of these things, we are aware of the potential limitations and blockages that we might be experiencing and how we can kind of work through those so that we can really open up and access and embody these archetypes. So, what is the priestess archetype and why are we studying her next after the alchemist? This is the final archetype of this pentagram journey. And, I think about these five archetypes in their relationship to one another and this journey that we're taking throughout the archetypes. And so we finish with the priestess, and she reconnects us back to the witch, which is our original archetype. So from the priestess, we can kind of go back around the circle and we can go back through these archetypes again and again. And it obviously doesn't always have to be in this linear fashion, but I think looking at it through this framework and this structure and this order can be really supportive. So when I speak about the priestess, what am I talking about? While my relationship to the priestess and working with this archetype is through the lens of energy and creation and tantra. And I'm going to talk about what all of those things are. But really, when I think about the priestess archetype, I think about the divine feminine archetype of being able to harness, master, and channel our life force energy into creation, into birthing something into the world. And so we think about that often in terms of like manifestation, right? And what are we creating in our lives, and how can we become active creators of our lives and not just passive recipients of our lives. And this is really what we're doing when we're working with the priestess archetype. So I want to kind of give some basics here, some foundational pieces to help us understand. So when I speak about creativity, creation, and manifestation, and even life force energy, right? What we're speaking about is, and this is a misconception I think that can happen a lot of times. When we hear the word tantra, a lot of people hear that word and they think that it's, hi Rio, do you want to be involved in the class? Come over here, or shush. Okay. When we hear the word tantra, a lot of people associate that with sexual practices, sacred sexual practices. And definitely that is an aspect of tantra. But what tantra really is it is a spiritual lineage and tradition that is about weaving together opposites. So when we think about weaving together opposites, we're weaving together at the highest level, we're weaving together spirit and matter, right? We're weaving together. We're not, a lot of spiritual traditions, especially very masculine spiritual traditions, aesthetic traditions, are about transcending matter. They're about stepping into the spirit realm, but not really embodying the material realm, not really living in the body, or we're using the body as a stepping stone to access higher states of consciousness or access the spirit realm. With Tantra, we're actually weaving these two together. So the body becomes a vessel through which we access spirit, and vice versa. So it's not, this is why when we hear tantra, we can think of sacred sexual practices, because tantra is one of the only spiritual traditions that does not exclude sexuality. Most spiritual traditions exclude sexuality. Sexuality is like not part of it. right? With Tantra, we actually see that sexuality is just one of many bridges through which we can access spirituality. And so we can involve our sexuality, our humanness, our mundane lives, our day-to-day experience, our like eating of food, our pleasure, all of those things get woven into our spiritual practice. They're not separate from it. And that is very different from most of the spiritual, especially the very masculine hierarchical spiritual traditions that we are used to. Even a lot of the Eastern spiritual traditions are very masculine based. Thinking of like Buddhism and even Hinduism, things like this, there's a lot of asceticism, meaning like deprivation of the senses, not experiencing pleasure through the material world. And really, there's like a separation of all of those things, anything that makes us human, whether that's like our senses, whether that's like enjoying certain foods, whether that's sexuality, like all of that is considered separate. And we're actually in those traditions, it's like an avoidance of those things in order to access spirituality. With Tantra, we are using all of those things. Everything is a bridge to access spirituality. And so there's so many different ways that this can play out. But when I think about working with tantric practices and that spiritual tradition, this is really about weaving our experience of being fully human and our experience of being fully divine at the same time, and weaving those two things together. So a lot of the tools and the practices that we're going to be learning in Rose Temple when we study this archetype we're going to be studying the energetic body. We're going to be studying the anatomy of the energetic body. So the chakras, the Kundalini, which the Kundalini is our life force energy. And what this really is, when we hear about Kundalini, again, this is like something that we can have a lot of misconceptions about. There can be a lot of fear even around Kundalini energy. Kundalini energy, what that really is it's your innate life force energy and your innate creation energy. And that innate life force energy, according to the system of Tantra, is your sexual energy. Our sexual energy is what creates life, quite literally, right? This is how we birth another human being into reality. And it's also the energy that we can use and harness and channel up our spine as the serpent rising of the Kundalini to create other things in our experience, to create our reality. Because again, like spirit and matter, there's this weaving together. They're not separated. So we're going to be, as we go into Rose Temple, we're going to be studying the anatomy of the energetic body, and we're going to be studying practices and tools, including pranayama, breath work, things like this, to actually get in touch with that energy, feel that energy, access that energy within our bodies, because our body is the vessel that holds it, and actually harness and move that energy through the body so that we can use it to create and use it to become powerful. And that is the word of the priestess archetype, is power. So as we come out of the transformation of the alchemist, where we go through this death and rebirth process, where there's a purification, where there's a clearing away, we rise from those ashes and we become powerful creators of our reality. And we get to birth a new reality as we step into the priestess archetype. So let's see. I'm going to come back to I have like notes in many places, but I'm going to come back to these notes, and I'm going to go to these notes now. So, okay, what is the priestess archetype about? She is about the mastery of our life force energy and really understanding energetics. So when we understand energy, energy is at the root of everything. And when we understand energy, we can begin to harness it, we can begin to become masterful with it, and we can direct it. And when we can direct energy, we can create with that energy. So embodying the priestess is embodying our full power. The priestess rises when we have evolved through the transformation of the alchemist. So when we are working with this archetype of the priestess, we are understanding that the power of the priestess is that the feminine, which is everyone has the feminine energy within them. Again, the weaving of the opposites. So part of the weaving of Tantra is weaving together masculine and feminine, weaving together. There's two main central channels that go in our energetic body up through the chakras, and those are the masculine and feminine channels. We want to create harmony and weave those together. We can also experience this through sexual union with another person, right? This is as above, so below. This is like basic alchemical principles. So when we're weaving together masculine and feminine within, or when we're weaving together masculine and feminine externally, it's a mirror. But the feminine is the source of creation energy. This is because we have something that the masculine does not have. We have a womb. And that womb space is what is the cultivation, preservation. This is where we create life from. Like a soul can be downloaded into reality through our womb space. And we can also create all kinds of different projects, missions, and other creative pursuits through that energy, through that sexual life force energy that lives in our womb space. And when we talk about awakening Kundalini energy, what that really means is that energy, it tends to be dormant at the base of the spine. It sits dormant at the base of the spine. It's like the imagery that we have of the Kundalini is a coiled serpent that lives at the base of the spine. And when we awaken the serpent rises through the chakras and reaches the crown chakra, which opens and clears and purifies all of those channels. So this is how we can start to use that creative energy that we all have lying dormant within us to start to be powerful creators of our reality and not just victims of life, right? Okay. So as women, we have this womb, and when we cultivate this priestess archetype, we are working to cultivate, preserve, protect, and master that energy source that lives within us. So as I spoke about at the beginning of this call, these preliminary classes that we're doing are we're working to help unblock the places that will prevent us from our full embracing and studying of these archetypes as we go into Rose Temple. So I want to talk about some of the ways that the priestess archetype, we can have blockages around this priestess archetype and how we can start to work with and clear some of those blockages. So because the priestess is about our power of creation, when we look at blockages to this energy and blockages to this embodying this archetype, we need to become aware of the ways that our energy and our life force is siphoned and extracted from us, or that we allow it to be siphoned and extracted from us. And unfortunately, we live in a world where the more powerful we become, the more there are forces in this world that will seek to siphon and harvest our life force energy. And so we need to be aware of those, because as we become more powerful conduits, right? And I say conduits because our body is the vessel that is holding a strong energetic frequency, a strong energetic channel. And that's what we're going to be doing with the practices. We're going to be practicing working with energy, moving energy through our body, and raising Kundalini so that we are holding and harnessing and like anchoring more energy, more current through our body. If we think of it like electricity, our body is like the the channel that's holding the electricity. How much voltage can we hold? The higher the voltage, the more power we have. And the more voltage or the more power that we're holding within our channel, within our system, the more there are going to be equal and opposite forces that are here to either try to diminish that power or siphon that power or leak that power in some way. And these can be forces within us. They can be forces external to us. And so we want to be really intentional about understanding what these are. So one of the first ways that this can happen, and something that's very important to be aware of, is that men do not have wombs, and therefore they do not have that same creative life force energy. They are not the source of creative life force energy in the same way that we are. And this means that in their relationship to us, they can either do one of two things. They can either amplify the current that we are already running through our system. So they can amplify the energy that we've already got going on, or they can extract from it. Those are the two things that they can do. So we need to be very intentional, especially within sexual relationships, because again, our sexual energy is our life force energy. So we need to be very aware of the fact that exchanging in those relationships, specifically with men, can lead to one of those two things, either an amplification of our power or an extraction of our power. Because men are not the source of magnetism or life force energy. They actually need women in order to access that energy. And this is one of the greatest inversions that we have been taught as a society. We have been taught and sold the belief that women need men to survive, that men don't really need us, but we really need them. And it's actually the exact opposite. They really need us. We're pretty much good either way. And so this programming and this like inversion that we've been sold over hundreds and thousands of years leads to all of these patterns, like women being submissive and subservient to men. It leads to women chasing men, women chasing validation and acceptance and approval of men. The financial and social systems that have been built to reinforce this inversion of power dynamics and condition us to believe that we need men. We've also been conditioned to fear, hide, and suppress our power, right? And this is where like the priestess ties back into the witch. And then we go again, even deeper into like unlocking the witch wound. Because the more power we start to channel through our body, the more of a conduit we become, the more voltage our system is able to hold, the more that fear of being in our power based on thousands of years of persecution is going to start to come up. And then we need to go back and we cycle back through. We heal the witch wound again. We go into the medicine woman and we heal the physical body and the vessel, and we become a stronger vessel to hold more current. We go back into the mystic and we get a larger vision. We go back into the alchemist. We let something die. We let something be reborn. And then we go back into the priestess and we channel more power through the system. So you can see how it's like this cycle that we're going through. So the more we access and experience our power through the body, through this vessel, as the vessel for Kundalini or life force, the more we might instinctively try to give our power away, or we might attract situations, relationships, and contexts within our life that drain and siphon our life force. And then that therefore reinforces the fear-based belief that our power is unsafe. So it's kind of like this negative feedback loop that we can get into. So the power of the priestess. Okay, let's talk about some of the ways, some of the aspects of accessing this power and accessing this. This is essentially what we're accessing with the priestess, is we're accessing innate feminine power. And this is the final archetype because we need to move through all those other pieces first. We need sovereignty from the witch so that we're not getting into like weird power dynamics with people. We need the integrity of the medicine woman so that we're rooted and we're anchored in the earth. We need the vision of the mystic so that our power is being directed in a meaningful way in our life. We need the transformation of the alchemist so that we can move through the challenges that are arising and use that to create even more power. So, and then we get to, this is like, honestly, the priestess is like the most fun one, but we need all this other work to get to her. So the power of the priestess. Okay, the power of the priestess, I wrote down all of these different words, and then I went into kind of some of the ways that we can be blocked around these things. So the power of the priestess is pleasure. The power of the priestess is sexual energy. It's desire. It's magnetism. It is creativity. It is the womb. It is our kundalini, and it is our power. So let's go into all of the ways that we have been shamed or locked up or heavily siphoned around this energy, and look at the ways that we might unconsciously allow this siphoning and extraction to occur. So that sabotages us being in our full power. So the first one is pleasure. And I wrote here punishment versus pleasure. Our conditioned relationship with spirituality is, like, if you even take one look at the Old Testament, you got this like mean, punishing, authoritarian, masculine God, right? So we can have a lot of repression around pleasure, especially based on the religious and spiritual conditioning that we experience from the external world. And because of this, many women find it hard to access pleasure in their day-to-day life, or we might feel that pleasure needs to be earned. This is something that we want to start to decondition as we work with the priestess archetype. Because pleasure is how we create our desires through the power of our womb, right? We need, pleasure is like, desire is the compass and pleasure is like the pathway. So in order to create something from our life force energy, we follow our desires and we do so through the pathway of pleasure. When we disown our pleasure, we are basically cutting off our access to this priestess archetype. When we feel that our pleasure needs to be externally sourced, whether that's from a partner or from life circumstances that make us feel good. When we're working with the priestess archetype, we are creating pleasure through our body and we're running that energy through our system. That energy makes us magnetic to our desires. A woman who is in her pleasure is a magnetic woman. Things are going to naturally come to a woman who is in her pleasure. And when I speak about radiance, this is a type of an energy of beauty that is beyond the physical form. It's an energy of beauty. Radiance is like, it's the life force energy that is glowing through your aura, right? It doesn't really matter how you look, what your hairstyle is, what your body shape is. Anyone can be radiant when they are fully in their body, when they're owning their power, when they're in their pleasure, and they're emanating that through their energetic field, through their energetic anatomy. That is a magnetic woman. That is a woman who is radiant and is going to attract the things that she desires towards her without force, without manipulation, without effort, even. It's like, which is really the power of manifestation when it comes to the priestess archetype. So we can disconnect from pleasure when we have the false belief that pleasure is associated with our preferences. And we tend to have this false belief. What I mean by this is that I like feeling good. I don't like feeling bad. So I can feel pleasure when I'm feeling good, but I can't feel pleasure when I'm feeling bad. The priestess learns how to experience pleasure through the full spectrum of human experience. Again, weaving of opposites. So there's a story that I've probably told like 100 times about this, but I think it's a really great one. So I'm going to tell it again. Maybe you've already heard it if you've worked with me for a while. But I had this experience many years ago now, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I was in this relationship that, you know, when you have that moment where you're like, where you see with absolute certainty that something is over, like this clarity comes and you're just like, oof, like this can't go on. Like this is the end. So I was in this relationship and that moment happened where it was like, we just can't, we can't move forward from this place. This is the end. And I was feeling a lot of sadness and grief about the ending of that relationship. It was a relationship that was filled with a lot of love, but just really wasn't going to work. And I was living in Costa Rica at the time, and it was like rainy season. So it was a really rainy day. And I decided I was wearing this velvet robe. So you can get the vibe. This is a robe. And I was wearing this, and I just locked myself in my room, and it was pouring rain outside, and I lit all the candles and I cried. And I sat in my grief and I created a pleasurable experience for my grief and my sadness. I was like cozy in my like velvet robe. I was like, this could be a movie, you know, like it was sexy. There were candles. I was crying. It was raining. It was like a whole vibe. And that was, even though it was really sad and really hard, there was pleasure in the experience because I was not turning away from the experience I was having. I was actually creating pleasure around the experience that I was having. And so when I say that we disconnect from pleasure by falsely associating pleasure with our preferences, what I mean by that is that when we're experiencing something that we don't prefer, like I didn't prefer to be going through heartbreak. No one ever really prefers that. But can I create pleasure around what's true? And so working with pleasure and disconnecting pleasure from preference means, okay, I might not like it. My ego, my little separate self here is like, no, gracias. Like, that's not my favorite. But yet, can I create pleasure around what's here? And this is going to be easier for us to do in certain places. Like in that experience, it was like making it more delicious. Yes, Robin. Yes. Making it more delicious. Like, how can we make it delicious? Like, even when it sucks, you know, like maybe I'm sick in bed and I can't go anywhere. Like, okay, how can I make it delicious? Like, can I make myself a really yummy soup and like sip my bone broth tea and like wear a cozy sweater and like watch some kind of movie that's going to inspire me? Like, what can I do to make it delicious? What can I do to make it romantic? What can I do to make it pleasurable, even though I hate it? Or even though my ego might be like, fuck this shit, you know? And there's going to be areas where it's easier to do that, and there's going to be areas where it's harder to do that. But the reason why this is so important, because this might seem very disconnected to what we're talking about, but the reason why this is so important is that pleasure creates a very high frequency. And the priestess is all about energy. It's all about the quality of the energy that we're running through our system. So if I am running the energy of victimhood, of blame, of feeling like, you know, even that you could create pleasure around. Like even that you could be like, poor me, no one's here to save me and everything's hard. And like, can I really amp that up and dramatize it and even like find some part of me has some kinky pleasure in that, some part of me wants to feel like a helpless, powerless victim maybe in that moment when I'm feeling that way. Okay, bring pleasure to it, because when you bring pleasure to it, you're taking the experience and you're creating a very high frequency around that experience. We're not bypassing the reality of the experience. This isn't like spiritual bypass. It's not like just be high vibe, just be happy all the time. No, we're bringing pleasure to the places where it's most uncomfortable to feel pleasure. And through doing that, we are holding this frequency, a very, very high frequency through our system, through our channel. And that is magnetic. That is magnetic. That allows us to manifest, to create from that place. So disconnecting pleasure from our preferences is part of the way that we start to unblock our relationship to pleasure. Okay, yeah, exactly. I just have like pleasure can be experienced in the full spectrum of life. And this is where we anchor into a higher frequency, even in challenging situations or extreme suffering. And so, like, even when we are in extreme pain, even when we are, and we're all going to have our versions of this where it's like, it feels impossible to access and we don't want to. We're like, no, I want to stay victim. But when we become aware that we're doing that, then we can even play into it. Then we can be like, okay, well, what pleasure am I getting out of being a victim here? Am I getting the pleasure of feeling like someone's going to come and rescue me? Like, okay, can I let myself feel that for a moment and then, move into something else? So pleasure, connecting with our pleasure and just looking at the ways that we have blocks around experiencing pleasure. I will add something here. I don't have this in my notes, but I will add that pleasure has been so demonized. Like, we are not supposed to be having a good time. Like, we are so conditioned that we're supposed to be so freaking serious all the time. And then we're not supposed to be experiencing pleasure. Pleasure is a crazy rebellion, to experience pleasure, especially when other people and like the world around us is really feeding this victim mentality. Like, people can really reject you being in your pleasure. Yeah, it can be considered as childish or it can be considered as selfish. Like, how dare you be in pleasure when like I'm suffering? There's a lot of that. Again, it's another one of the ways where we are being asked to hold more power. And there's the more power that we hold, like the more that you just live in pleasure, the more that you're going to experience resistance from the world around you, from being in that pleasure. And this is why the more power that we're channeling through us, the more we have to be aware of those systems and energies, and just like energies can be like even the mood of other people, you know, that want to bring us down, that want to siphon that energy, that want to distract and distort that energy. Wow, there are even religions that prohibit loud laughters. Yeah. So, I mean, we're really taught that like pleasure and spirituality do not go hand in hand. And that's because most of the spiritual traditions that we have access to through our like mainstream society are not actually empowering us to connect with spirit. They are hierarchical systems of domination and control. Like that's what they actually are. If we want people to be empowered to connect to spirit, then we want people to be in their power, meaning channeling power through their system. And being in your pleasure is one of the most powerful ways to do that. Okay. The next one is sexual energy. So leaking our sexual energy is one of the biggest ways that we can leak our power and that we can be blocked in accessing this priestess archetype. So I'm going to explain this. I'm going to go into this. There was actually a question about this from someone who was at the witch call, and we were speaking about this. And so I'm going to go into a little bit of why this is important. So as women, we have this womb space. Whether or not you even have a physical womb, there's an energetic signature of womb energy, which is creation energy. And that portal in our body, what it is designed to do, both physiologically and energetically, is to amplify what is seated there, right? We think of what happens biologically when we create a baby inside of our womb. There's a seed that's implanted, and then that gets amplified into a whole human being through the power of the womb. It's crazy, right? And so that energetic center, what it's meant to do is it's meant to hold energy and it's meant to amplify what is seated there. So when we are leaky with our sexual energy, when we allow unsafe energies or unintegral energies into this temple of our body, our wombs will amplify what is seated there. And the problem of this is twofold, because men have been conditioned to expel and release trauma, stress, and negativity through a sexual release. That's like deeply conditioned into every single man on the planet right now. So what's happening? If they're not conscious of their sexual energy and they're releasing and expelling their trauma, their stress, and their negativity into the womb, and then that energy is being amplified and held there, right? Not great. Not super great for us and our power. So we need to, both men and women need to learn how to master, contain, and purify our sexual energy and our Kundalini life force energy. Men can learn how to do this. And when they learn how to do this, they're going to be channeling that energy and purifying their own energy so that the energy that they're releasing is not negative. But most men have been conditioned to use sex as a dumping and a release of heavy, dense trauma and negativity. And so, you know, we have a lot of conditioning that has convinced women that it's more spiritual to and liberated to be leaky with our sexual energy. And this is not like a judgment or a condemnation, but it is just really important for us to be aware of how powerful these energies are and to understand the conditioning that we have around being sexually promiscuous and understand that that conditioning is a way to diminish our power and our life force. under this guise of liberation, because it's not liberating for us to be storing and amplifying the negativity and trauma of many different men within our womb space. And if we have sexual trauma, that's another layer, right? That energy can be held and stored. And we're going to actually, I need to make a note of this, make sure that I include this as a practice. But we're going to have a practice around that in Rose Temple, to clear energy that is stored within the womb, to clear energy like that we have from past experiences, from past partners, whatever it may be, that can be stored and held in that space, how we can clear and purify that channel so that we can hold more power, so that we can hold more creation, so that we can have more access to, one, our pleasure, and then two, our creative life force energy, which are really linked. Okay, so the next one is our desires. So I spoke about how desire is the compass for creation energy. And when we limit our desires, we are limiting our power. So women are often afraid to own what we really want. We often fear that what we want is not available to us, or that we can't have it for some reason. We are often taught to externalize our focus on other people, and that we should put all of our energy and attention into creating for others. And when we do that, we are not only not attuned to our own needs, we're not attuned to our desires. Desire is like one step further than needs, right? And so if we have trouble accessing our own needs, which most women who I work with, and myself included, do, then we're going to have even more trouble accessing our true desires. And this is also why we are studying the priestess after the alchemist, because the alchemist is going to transform and transmute and shed away layers of false protection and layers of limitation and illusion and distortion that are pulling us, so that are pulling us away from what we really desire. And when we clear a lot of that away, it's going to be like, okay, well, who am I really beneath all of that shadow that I just cleared? Because I thought that that was my identity. And now I realized that that was just shadow operating based on trauma and conditioning and childhood experiences and et cetera, et cetera. When we clear that stuff away, we can be left with this open space of like, okay, well, who am I and what do I really want beneath all of that? And so when we are working with the priestess archetype, we are working with the energy of desire. We are getting in touch with our authentic desires and allowing desire to be the guiding light. And what tends to happen for a lot of us is that we don't trust either our creative power to birth our desires, or we don't trust God because we have this relationship with God as being punishing. And so we can have this fear that our desires are not possible for us. And owning our desire means the possibility of what if it's not, what if I don't get it? What if for some reason I can't do it, or I don't have it in me to create it, or God's punishing me because I didn't manifest right, or I didn't do my work well enough, or whatever it may be. We can have those fears that our desires aren't possible for us. And in those fears, we can limit ourselves from even allowing ourselves to consider what those desires really are beneath the surface. And so when we do this, we are disconnecting from our compass. because desire is the compass of that creation and expansion life force. Desire is the seed that births any new creation. And so the other aspect of desire for the feminine is that as feminine beings with a womb, we have access to infinite potential. That is what the womb is. It's like this portal into infinite creation and potential and the void. And with that, inherently within our biology, we have this infinite capacity for more. And we experience this often in our lives when we really want something. Let's say we really want, this is an example that I first heard that helped me understand this concept. Let's say we really want partnership. We're like, I want a partner. We get the partner. And then we're like, I want more commitment. I want more depth. I want more intimacy. We get it. And then no matter how much more depth, intimacy, connection we get, there's this infinite longing for more intensity, for more connection, for more intimacy, for more, because we know that it's possible. Because we have a womb, we know that there is infinite potential for more, and we long to experience it. This is the feminine polarity. The feminine desire is for fullness. And so, you know, we're meant to create through our womb. We have this infinite capacity for more that's begging to be experienced through form, through our body, through our life experience. And we have these masculine spiritual traditions that vilify desire, that are teaching us that, teaching detachment from the material realm, that desire is not spiritual, that, you know, wanting more, because the masculine, and these traditions are typically male centric, the masculine is seeking emptiness. And so their traditions are about like, shave your head, go live in a monastery, own nothing, and be with stillness and absolute emptiness, right? Like those are their that's like a very masculine practice. They're seeking the state of emptiness through those practices. We are not seeking emptiness. We are seeking fullness. We want color. It's why we fill our houses with things. It's why we have little knickknacks. It's why we wear jewelry. It's why we paint our nails. Like we want to make we want to add life. The feminine is Shakti. It's the life force that animates the emptiness. We need both, right? We need the emptiness and the fullness. We weave them together. But the feminine side of it is the more, is that infinite capacity for more. And nature is the feminine. Nature is like always doing something new, you know, nature's always up to something. It's not empty. It's the opposite of empty. It's like Shakti energy. There's always a new flower blooming and dying and decaying and a new bloom over here. And so much happening all the time. And that desire for creation, for more, for that Shakti to move through us is innately feminine. And yet we can, the trick with the desire is to not get caught up in believing that our desire for more means that we're in lack. That's the trick. Because if I want something, if I have a desire for a relationship, let's say, I have a desire for love, I have a desire to be with my soulmate, then if that desire is not yet here, I could falsely interpret that as being in lack. which brings me into our next piece, which is magnetism. So magnetism is the next aspect of this priestess archetype. And when we are stuck in the mental loops of not enoughness or of suffering or limitation or fear, etc., we're not magnetic to our desires, because magnetism is born of gratitude and pleasure. And the illusion is that when our desire is not yet here, like it's still in the void, it hasn't arrived yet at our doorstep, that we are in lack, which creates a mental and emotional energetic state of deprivation, not enoughness. When we're in that place of not enoughness, we create more of the energy that we're embodying. That's like the basic principle of this whole thing. We create more of the energy that we're embodying. So if I'm embodying not enoughness, I'm going to experience more lack. I'm going to experience more deprivation. When we can stop making our desires wrong and stop feeling like the lack of it being here yet means that we're in this place of not enoughness, we can create a magnetic space for the desire to move towards us. So what does that look like? It looks like practicing appreciation and gratitude while holding the desire for more. Because the false piece here is that the desire means that we don't have it, and so then we get into the not enoughness. Instead of believing the desire means, what the desire really means, if we have a desire for something on a soul level, that thing is meant for us. It can't escape us. So when we trust our desire, when we heal our relationship with desire, and know and feel and believe, like, if I desire something, that must mean that it's meant for me. And that means that it's already on its way. Can I be grateful for that? Can I appreciate the space between here and it arriving? Can I be in a state of pleasure and gratitude for having the desire and for where I'm at right now, even if the desire has not fully landed in material form? That's how we create magnetism. We become like, what's the word I'm thinking? Like repellent to our desires when we feel like we either make our desires wrong, like we feel like we shouldn't be desiring so much, or we feel like we're in lack, we're in the state of deprivation, we're in the state of not enoughness, right? This is when we attract more experiences that are going to teach us lessons and show us how we already have everything we need inside of us. But when we can be in the pleasure of the longing, which is the desire not yet fulfilled. And longing is one of the states of the feminine. It's the state of, desire means that we're ungrateful. No, desire means that the universe is trying to give us something, and we're like meant to be the channel through which it happens. We're meant to bring it into form, because form and spirit, we're weaving them together through our vessel. Our vessel is the channel through which that spirit and matter gets woven together. Our life is the vessel. So if I have a desire, that means that's meant for me. It's already on its way. And can I enjoy, again, the pleasure piece, right? Can I bring pleasure to the longing? Because longing is delicious. We love it. We love it so much. We pretend we hate it. We love it. We read romance novels about like chapters and chapters and chapters of longing, you know, like the star-crossed lovers, they can't be together. There's like, this tension. The longing is the tension. We love it. And we love when the tension is released and the thing finally comes. That's the receiving part. We love that part too. But can we be in the pleasure of the longing instead of making the longing wrong? As soon as we make the longing wrong, we become so much less magnetic. Because now we're putting out an aura of not enoughness. We're running that energy through our field. We're running ungratefulness through our field versus running pleasure, running appreciation, running gratitude. Those are the most magnetic frequencies that you can be running through your system at any time. Okay. The feminine will always desire more. Always, always, always. That's the whole point. That's what we're here. That's what we're here to do. We're here to ask for more, 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 you know? And because we know it's possible, because we know we have that connection to the womb, we have that connection to the void, to the infinite. We know that everything is possible. So we can access that through our desire for more. Okay, the next one is creativity leaks. So this is about looking at where we leak our creative energy. This can be drama, addictions, blame, mental cycles. Our creativity is our imagination. Our imagination is our creative energy. So what we spend our time and energy imagining is what we're directing our life force energy towards. If we are constantly using our imagination, our creative imagination energy to imagine worst case scenarios and fearful experiences, we are creating that, right? If we're using our imagination to dream up like wonderful, magical experiences, we're using our creative energy towards a positive creation. So we want to have mental discipline and also energetic boundaries around distractions and distortions. This is like, you know, I love when in Women Who Run with the Wolves, Clarissa Pinkola Estes talks about this, and she talks about how if a woman allows her domestic chores to take her away from her creative life, then she will never have a creative life because the floors will always need to be cleaned. And that is like one of the most powerful, it's not a direct quote, that's like very much a summary of the quote. But she talks about that in that book. And I think that is such an important thing for us to remember as women. It is the way that our creative energy can get boxed into a little corner of when I have time. And, you know, if we're always in this obligation energy of the things that must be done, that time will never come. And the other piece I want to mention around creative energy and creativity leaks is consuming versus creating. This is a big one, especially in the age of social media. We can be in this constant state of consumption. And when we're consuming, we're not creating. And so we want to be really mindful of that as well. All the ways that we leak our creative energy. Okay, we talked about this one, womb healing. We talked about being, well, we didn't necessarily talk about this, but through this priestess archetype, we're working with reconnecting to our womb, reconnecting to our pleasure, sexual pleasure. With womb healing, we're healing womb sexual trauma. So we talked a little bit about that. Womb harvesting. So this is one of the ways, this is like so widespread that women are using their creative life force energy, their womb energy, to pour in to someone else's dreams and mission and vision, and letting that energy be harvested for the creation of someone else's dreams. We can also be disconnected from the power of the womb through the illusion that the womb only births children, and that is connected to the false belief that women are only useful for sexual harvesting and for birthing the lineage, right? And actually, that womb energy is so much more than what it can provide to men. And that is a really big illusion that we need to kind of work ourselves out of. And so, yeah, we're going to be working with practices to reconnect to the womb space and like receive her wisdom, receive her energy. Okay, I have some notes on Kundalini awakening here. So Kundalini awakening is something that I think is like so crazy the way that everyone's talking about it nowadays. I've heard people say that it's not safe to awaken your Kundalini. I've heard people say like you have to be really careful and you can accidentally awaken your Kundalini and then you can go into like, look, I actually do know someone who I say that, and then I actually do know someone who has a like really crazy experience with Kundalini energy. But he did something crazy. He pushed himself past his threshold in a ceremony, a spiritual ceremony, and he opened his Kundalini channel too much. And now that energy is running through him and he can't control it. And it's like bringing absolute chaos into his life. So that, okay, I do want to acknowledge that that is a thing. However, I believe that if you're working, this was also, by the way, this story, to just like make sure that there's no fear here, was through an ayahuasca ceremony. That's how that happened. So we're not going to be doing any kind of plant psychedelics in this program. We're working with the power of our breath, which the power of our breath is our life force energy. So we're going to be working with the power of our breath and channeling our breath and using yogic and tantric practices to work with the energy body, to strengthen the energy body. And Kundalini energy and Kundalini awakening is like not something that can really be forced or rushed. It happens on its own timeline. What it means when people say Kundalini awakening, what they really mean is that life force energy that's coiled at the base of the spine, that's laying dormant at the base of the spine, it wakes up. And when it wakes up, it moves up through the chakra system and it awakens each chakra. So as it does that, there's a purification process that happens, and there's a clearing of each chakra that happens for this energy to move and travel through the whole channel. In my experience, and unless you're doing like really, we talked about this in one of the other classes, I think in the Medicine Woman and Integrity, we were talking about like these forceful, aggressive spiritual practices. I'm not into any of that, so we're not going to be doing anything like that. But unless you're doing crazy stuff like that, I don't believe that it's unsafe to awaken Kundalini. I really believe that it's something that's going to happen naturally and organically. For me, I experienced my first time experiencing that. I knew about yoga. I'd been practicing yoga and I'd been doing breathwork and all these things for several years. I knew about the chakra system, and I was doing breathwork one day with a friend who was guiding it. And all of a sudden I started to experience and feel my chakras, starting with my root, spinning like a wheel. It was like spinning. And I was like, oh, something's happening here. And then I felt the energy move up into my sacral chakra. And then that chakra started spinning. And then I felt it move up into my solar plexus and it started spinning. And that went through all the chakras until I felt all of them open and activate. And after that, I needed to lay down and I needed to rest and I needed to integrate. But it wasn't this like crazy thing that happened. It was just like, I was like, oh, that's what people mean when they say like Kundalini. I was like, that's what that was, that's what that is. And it can be different for everyone, and there can be layers to it. And we're going to talk about the chakra system. A really great book, if you want to study that more, is called Eastern Body, Western Mind. That book talks about each of the chakras, and it talks about the balancing of each chakra and how any of those chakras can be in a state of imbalance, either under functioning or over functioning, what that looks like. And so that you can, start to understand that, because the energy can get stuck anywhere along the channel. So if we have like a blocked heart chakra, then the energy might not be able to move up past the heart. When we're working with Kundalini energy, there can be a purification process that's happening. So this can look like a clearing as the life force energy moves through and travels through the channel. This can include things like illnesses, or like clearings of people, places, toxicity, things from our life, right? And I don't think this is like a one and done thing. It's not like you awaken Kundalini and then you're done forever. It's like you're constantly working with life force energy and creating a vessel that can hold a higher voltage. So when we talk about holding a higher voltage, there's a purification process for that vessel to be a strong, sturdy container to hold that. And this is why this is the last archetype that we're working with, because we're going to do all this other work first to prepare to be even doing this, right? So in the witch, for example, we're going to be learning how to create a protection around yourself, how to hold your field, how to open your crown, open your root, how to do all these things, so that by the time you get to these practices where you're like working with your life force energy in this way, there's a safety there, there's an integrity there, there's all these other foundations that are in place. But I just want to share some of this because I think it's, something to look forward to, and it's important to kind of know where we're going. So yeah, we talked about this. When spiritual practices focus on the upper chakras without purifying the lower chakras, we can become disembodied spiritually. And this can lead to, we talked about this in the modern mystic, like a disconnect between reality and spirituality. Most tantric teachings and yogic teachings teach that we are purifying the lower triangle, which is the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus chakra. We're purifying those. Those are where the ego resides. And so we got to purify those. We got to work with those lower chakras quite a bit before we can start moving energy up into like third eye and crown chakra, right? Okay. And then, yeah, we can, of course, when we are awakening, when anyone is working with energy without integrating, or when there is like, just like disembodied, again, like when we're trying to jump, this is a really great example. I had a teacher, one of my yoga teachers, and someone asked about psychedelics in the yoga class. And the teacher was like, well, you can experience higher states of consciousness through psychedelics. You can basically the metaphor he gave was that he was like, oh yeah, like I took acid once and I went into the Himalayas, and he was like, I can tell you, like I went to I was in a very high state of consciousness. But what you're doing when you do that is like you're taking the elevator to the roof, and you're seeing what's up there. You're seeing this very high state of consciousness, but then you come down off psychedelics, you have to go back down the elevator and you're back at the ground floor. He's like, yoga is taking the stairs. So you can reach the roof, you can still get to that state of consciousness, but you're getting there in a more slow and a sustainable way where you can actually stay there versus jumping there. And he said, like, for some people, it can be helpful to see what's up there, to know where you're going, maybe that's helpful, but it's not a spiritual, it's, you have to come back down. And so when we're doing things like this, where we're skipping the steps, this can be problematic, right? And I think this is when people can experience like challenging stuff. So the other thing that can happen with when we're working with the energetic body, and this is something that I'm also going to be teaching you, is how to understand what is yours and what is not yours, and how to work with your energetic field to clear energy. So this can be like clearing cords. This can be because whenever we have a relationship with someone, we create emotional and energetic cords and attachments to those things. We can have cords to places, to people, to situations. We can have disembodied sort of entities or energetic beings that are connected to our energetic fields, that are feeding off of our life force energy, right? And we want to be able to, as we study the energetic anatomy and the practices and the tools and this energy work that I'm going to teach you how to do on yourself, you're going to be able to work with and clear those energies out of your field. Okay, last one is power. So where we leak our power and give our power to circumstances, drama, people, situations, energies that are sent to siphon and distract us from our mission. As I mentioned several times, as we channel more power, we have more responsibility. And with that responsibility, there's going to come other types of energies that are sent to throw us off mission, right? That are here to distract us, that are here to pull us away from that. And so the greater the mission and the greater the power that we're holding through our vessel, the more that equal and opposite force of dark forces is going to come and try to extract that power. And true spiritual boundaries is when we realize that nothing can have power over us unless we give it our energy. And one of the biggest ways that we give our energy away is through fear. And this can be so subtle. And I'm not saying like it doesn't mean that it's not real and that it's not happening and that we don't need to address it. But it's like part of addressing it is pulling our power back from the situation, right? So an example of this is like, as you guys know, I'm dealing with this whole situation of potential mold in my house, and it's been making me really sick and also really afraid, because when you start thinking about mold, when you start going down that mold rabbit hole, it's like you start getting really freaked out. It can really send you into a fear spiral, at least for me. And so what I realized though is like, yes, okay, the mold might be real and I need to address that by probably moving out of this house, but also I don't have to give it power. It's not like I'm not gaslighting myself. I'm not pretending that it's not happening. It's definitely happening and it's definitely not good, but I don't need to feed it my fear energy. Because the more that I feed it that fear energy, the more that I feel sick and the more that I feel like out of control and that I don't have power over my life. And like, I'm giving my power to that situation. So this can be the same with toxic relationships. This can be the same with anything that tries to siphon and steal our power. One of the greatest ways that we give our power away is through fear. So yeah, true spiritual boundaries is when we realize that nothing can have power over us unless we give it our energy. I'm laughing at the version of myself that wrote these notes. So Taylor Swift quote, think of your energy as if it's expensive. Think of your energy as if it's expensive. Your energy, if you spend all day worrying about something or thinking about like, being in that state of fear, you're giving your energy to that thing. Think of your energy as if it's expensive. Taylor Swift. Okay, yeah. So energy and creativity and life force are limitless. The problem is having leaks in our containment or just not having a strong enough vessel to hold it. Right. And so that's what we're going to be working with doing in Rose Temple. Okay, so I have a couple more notes here on, we're getting to the end. Wow, it's going so quick. A couple more notes here on just creation and manifestation. And, we've spoken a lot about how working with this priestess archetype is about working with life force energy and working with that energy to bring things into matter. And at the same time, this is not a creation and manifestation energy that's coming from a place of forcing or from creation from the ego. This is really about holding a high resonance in our energetic fields, meaning holding a high frequency, holding power and holding like a high voltage of energy in our fields so that we are magnetic to whatever is most of service to us. And we might not know consciously what that is, right? Sometimes with manifestation, we can get very attached to a specific expression of our desire. And that's where we want to be careful, because when we get attached to that, that's the ego. That's the ego saying like, it's one thing for me to say like, okay, I have a desire to be connected with my soulmate. That's very different from saying, I think my soulmate is that guy over there and I want him to love me. Different, right? Now I'm attached to a specific object versus to a desire. So we want to hold the desire, and the desire may be non-specific. The desire might be like for, I'm actually going to give you an example of this, but essentially when we're holding this high frequency, when we're holding this resonance and this magnetism in our energetic field, we become magnetic to what is of highest service to us. We become magnetic to what is meant for us. And that might be beyond what our mind even has comprehension of. But this is why we're in co-creation with the divine. It's not just like me and my will and my ego overpowering. It's like I'm in co-creation, but I'm holding a really strong resonance field so that what's meant for me is going to be attracted to me and is going to come into my life in the perfect timing. And the more power and the more energy that I'm holding, there is also more responsibility to be of service through that power. And so it might not always look like how we think or we want it to look. And an example of this is where, this is a really great example of how the alchemist weaves shifts into the priestess, is like, we can think that we have a desire for one thing. And then as we do the alchemy, as we do the shadow work, as we go a little deeper, we can realize, oh, The desire is actually for something much deeper. So an example of this that I've been experiencing that I talked to you guys about last week is like, I have had this desire for stability, or I thought I had a desire for stability. And I was associating stability with staying in one house for a long time. And that's clearly like probably shifting, right? And so it's like, okay, but what is actually beneath that desire for stability? Or what do I think stability is going to give me? Well, what I actually desire is what I think stability is going to give me is this, it's going to free up energy, because needing to move all the time takes a lot of energy. Needing to go through these transitions, it takes a lot of energy. So what do I actually want is vitality. What I actually want is vitality. What I actually want is more energy. What I actually want is to be able to hold more energy in my system. So instead of getting attached to, I need to stay in this house because I want stability, right? That's a specific outcome, versus holding the desire for what's of highest service to me, which is like more vitality is of, I can clearly see that would be a service not only to me, but it would also be of service to my service that I'm here to offer the world, right? And so can I hold that desire, the desire for more vitality, and allow what needs to shift and fall away through that process of alchemy to do so, in order for me to hold more power, hold more energy, hold an even higher resonance in my fields. Okay, I think that is where we're going to close it off for today. I know it was a ton of information. I didn't mean to bombard you and so much, but I might have. You can always come back and rewatch. So yeah, if you're here watching on the recording, thanks for being here. If you're here in person, thanks for listening. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the class.